There's a man who follows me around and narrates my life, and he's started to say some unsettling things. He's always been there, although I actually don't know if he's a he, and though I wouldn't want to assume anything, the voice is definitely a male's voice. I've never seen his face, always the back of him. He wears a black trench coat with a popped collar so that all I can really see is the very top of his head apart from his black boots. I can't communicate with him, and I figured this out a few years back. He just stands a few feet away from me at all times, his back to me, narrating my entire life. No one else can see him. I figured this out a few years ago back as well, nor can they hear him. My day usually starts off the same. I always wake up to the same sentence.
Natalia wakes up and rolls over in her bed.
Every single day he says that because that is what I do. It's all very mundane. My life is not that interesting after all. I sort of learned to live with it, and, I can almost tune him out now. I've never really told anyone else about him because I know that no one would believe me. So I really don't have much of a choice other than learning to deal with it and tuning him out when I really need to. About a week ago, I was cooking dinner, mashed potatoes and black bean tacos, and tuning him out as normal. As I was chopping up some cilantro for my tacos, however, he said something that caught my attention.
Natalia is innocently chopping cilantro, without any knowledge that she is in grave danger.
I froze, the knife in the middle of my small pile of cilantro, and I looked over at him. He was standing on the other side of the kitchen island, facing my dinner table. "What?" I asked, knowing that he wasn't going to reply. At this point, I think I'd be more freaked out about him replying than him not. He said nothing for a few minutes, so I finished chopping, wiping the pieces of cilantro that got stuck to the blade with my finger, and cutting it in the process. Ouch! I walked, turned around, and turned on the faucet, rinsing the knife and my finger.
Natalia cut herself, and her blood oozes out, pleasing the one who watches.
I turned the faucet off and turned around. He hadn't moved, but I was sure that I had heard him correctly. I walked over to the window on the wall to my left and pulled on the cord, shutting the blinds as I became paranoid. I managed to eat my dinner and do the dishes without any other weird comments and got ready for bed. As I got sleepier, I reached over and turned off the lamp by my bed, rolling over onto my left side and closing my eyes.
Natalia rolls over, closing her eyes, and peacefully lying in her bed. What she doesn't know, however, is that she will soon face a horrible fate that will end in her death.
I opened my eyes, sitting up and looking over at his silhouette, slightly lit by the moonlight. I waited a few minutes, but he said nothing else, and I eventually returned to sleep. I woke up the next morning as my alarm went off.
Natalia wakes up and rolls over in bed, one day closer to her inevitable death.
I got up, walking into the bathroom and slamming the door shut, annoyed and a little bit scared. He had been narrating my entire life and had never said anything creepy or out of the ordinary, so what was going on now? I opened the faucet and began splashing water onto my face.
Natalia washes her face, but she doesn't seem to realize that it is much easier for someone to attack her when her eyes are closed.
I rinsed the soap away from my eye area and looked at my reflection in front of me and at his, standing behind me. I finished rinsing my face with my eyes open and managed to dry it without completely covering my eyes. The rest of my week went pretty similar. Normal narrations for the most part, with some creepy stuff sprinkled in.
He is coming for her very soon. It is unavoidable. Natalia must die.
Every time he said something, I looked around at my surroundings paranoid. I spent the entire week anxious and paranoid. I barely slept, fearing that I would wake up in the middle of the night to someone performing spontaneous surgery on me. I put a knife in my bedside drawer and pepper spray it under my pillow. Yesterday, there were more creepy things than usual.
Natalia's days are numbered. Natalia has been feeling anxious, as she should. The one who watches is arriving shortly. The one who watches is very excited to kill Natalia. There will be no escape, only death.
I didn't go out anywhere for fear that would somehow cause whatever was going to happen sooner. Last night, I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth and staring at his reflection behind me in the mirror. As I swished mouthwash around in my mouth, he spoke again.
Natalia brushes her teeth for the last time. Tomorrow, she dies.
I spit out the mouthwash, choking on a bit that had made its way down my throat. I coughed and wheezed.
Natalia choked on the mouthwash, feeling like she was dying. But it's not her time yet. Her time is tomorrow.
I managed to catch my breath and walked over to my bed, crawling in and leaving the lamps on. The last thing I needed was to be woken up at midnight and have to fight off a killer in the dark. I woke up today, a few hours before my alarm, and got up. I was still alive. Nothing was out of place. Maybe I wasn't going to die today. Maybe it was all just some sort of fluke. I walked into the bathroom and grabbed my toothbrush. I squeezed out some toothpaste to brush my teeth and put the toothbrush in my mouth. I looked up in the mirror at my reflection and then froze. I spit into the sink and looked around the bathroom. I stuck my head back into my bedroom and looked around there as well. I made my way through every single room in my house, but he was nowhere to be seen. He was gone. Gone. 25 years following me around and narrating my life. And now suddenly, when I was supposed to die, he just disappeared. Somehow, this made me feel worse, as I realized that while the things he was saying were creepy, they were also helping me by warning me how much time I had left. Now I had no warning, and no choice but to wait it out and see what happened. I can't shake the feeling that I'm definitely going to die. But how? And by who? Who was the one who watches? What did that even mean? I spent my entire day in the kitchen. I figure there are more exits here as well as weapons, and I'd probably be safer here than in another smaller room of the house. So far, nothing's happened. I've been sitting in complete silence, which is odd, because I've never been in complete silence. About an hour ago, all the lights began to flicker in the house, but that only lasted a few seconds, and now it's gone and back to normal. I still don't know what to expect, but I think I'm probably safer at my house. Well, I thought I would be, until the doorbell rang. I got up and walked into the living room, walking up to the door and peering out of the peephole. It was him. He was standing outside on my porch, with his back to me as usual. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe as I just watched him standing there. He's still out there now, but he hasn't said a word. I'm still in my kitchen, not knowing what to do. I could hear him mumbling outside the door a few minutes ago, and I finally decided to get up. And listen.
2,000. 1,999. 1,998. 1,997.
He's still counting down, and I've now got about 20 minutes left. I can see that it's getting darker and darker outside as he counts down, even though it's not even 3 o'clock in the afternoon yet. Every time I look out the window, something disappears. A house on my street, a car, a tree. Whenever something vanishes, it's replaced with darkness. And he keeps counting down. This might be my last chance at communication. I'm going to die today. Has anyone met a backwards walking person? Okay, so I don't usually go public with this kind of thing. In fact, I'm a little embarrassed. I have a feeling I'm freaking out about nothing here, but you guys seem to have heard of every kind of creepy thing, and I'm really hoping I'll be able to connect with someone who's come across this before. Has anyone here seen or heard about people who only move backwards? Backwards walking people? I'm not sure what to call it. Like, no matter how I say it, it sounds a little goofy. But I'm really rattled about what I saw a few days ago. Okay, so just to set the scene, I live in a medium-sized college town. Not big or dense enough to be a city, but still very walkable. I live in the downtown area, so I walk to and from my job, mostly via this paved bike path that connects the downtown area to a few other neighborhoods. This happened at a section of the path near the edge of the town. It's an elevated section that drops off on one side, so it's flanked by a black iron fence on the side to protect cyclists. On the other side, there's a long brick wall, the backside of a row of shops. There's some spaced out streetlights and a few nooks off the main path with benches and decorative bushes. I work at a restaurant, so I was walking home pretty late, about 1 a.m. I noticed some footsteps on the path in front of me that were a little odd. They sounded clumsy and dragging, maybe drunk. A junkie, maybe. Great. I usually felt pretty safe in this neighborhood, but the bike path did sometimes become a hangout spot for all kinds of people after dark. I tried to just keep my head down and not alter my pace so I could pass by unnoticed. It sounded like the steps were coming in my direction, so I kept an eye out, and sure enough, a figure came into view ahead of me on the path. In the gap between streetlights, it was difficult to make out specific features, but I could see the person's awkward gait. They had the sway of a very intoxicated person, a slight lull of the head, hands held out as if to maintain balance. Definitely some sort of druggie, like I'd thought, but something about the vagueness of the badly illuminated form made me feel this sudden and intense unease. For a split second, I actually considered turning around just to avoid the person, but I talked myself out of it. I know, gut instincts and gift of fear and all that. Turning around would have made my walk a lot longer and darker, and it was cold out and I was exhausted. I could see that the person was going slow, that they were walking close to the fence, so I planned on just powering on past them. I even forced a little chuckle at the idea that I'd been doing so many mental calculations because I was spooked by some random person. In hindsight, though, it really was forced. Even though I was trying to reason with myself, the uncomfortable feeling kept getting stronger the closer I got to this person, so I kept an eye on the figure as it began to shuffle into the light of one of those street lamps and become more clear. Soon, I could make out that it was a woman. She was slightly shorter than me and had a long, sloppy ponytail and a bulky coat on. And strangely, I realized that the reason her gait looked so awkward was that she was walking backwards towards me. Her steps were clumsy and heavy, but fairly steady, purposeful even. She didn't seem to be having any trouble following the path, and though her hands were still held up, she never touched the fence. Once I could see her clearly, I started to notice that I was really afraid. It started small, just this clenched feeling in my gut, but it had this primal quality that I imagine must be what a prey animal feels when the shadow of a hawk passes by. Something on an instinctual level was telling me to get out of there. The fastest way to get home, though, was to go past this woman. She was just some lady. She was smaller than me, and her hands were empty. I was taking a deep breath to steady myself when she stopped. The silence was abrupt. Her footsteps had been dragging across the pavement, and on a cold night like this, there wasn't any other sound from the nearby shops. She never turned to look at me, but I had the feeling she'd noticed my presence. "Are you okay?" I blurted out. The silence was too unbearable for me to not say anything. My voice sounded weird and pinched and way too loud. You okay? I felt a current of fear go up my spine. Her voice wasn't what I expected at all. It was soft and breathy with this strange halting quality, like she was confused. Do you need some help? I was making a desperate bid for normalcy at this point. She remained silent and did not move. I pressed on, because I can call an ambulance or something if you need. There was a long, silent pause. I didn't move. She moved her head very slightly, as if reorienting herself, but she didn't turn to look at me. I can call an ambulance. Her tone was all wrong, not slurred like a drunk, but careful, like it was saying the words for the first time. I realized with a pang of horror that she was moving slightly, inching 1 foot back towards me in a coiled, slow motion that reminded me of the way a cat stalks a bird. Ambulance? She repeated, and her voice was soft, almost a whisper, and eager in this deep and hungry way. She took a full step backwards towards me. I had been rooted down by fear, but when she moved, I took a step back and I noticed that she reoriented again at the sound of my footfalls, like she couldn't see me but was blindly following the sound. We were barely 6 feet away from each other at this point. My brain was screaming, "Run!" But my logic told me that I didn't want to upset her in case she was aggressive, so what I did was I sped walk forward as fast as I could, hugging the brick wall. I so fully expected her to lunge at me when I passed her that I was fully coiled and ready to defend myself. I even curled my fist around my keys in my pocket in that probably useless self-defense way. But she didn't even move an inch when I went past her. Didn't even move her head. I didn't hear her take another step either. That's important. She didn't take a single step. I mention that because I couldn't help but turn and take one more look at her as I passed, partially to make sure she was still there, and partially because I had this awful curiosity about her face, partially because I was hoping she just looked like some junkie and I could forget about this whole weird thing. When I looked back, though, she was still facing away from me. Instantly, silently. And even though her back was to me, it felt like she was watching me. That's when I did run. I know this is nothing extreme, almost anticlimactic, but I can't explain how utterly, primally afraid I was when I looked back and saw that she was still backwards. She was still backwards. I felt the surge of panic and I ran almost the entire way back to my house. She didn't follow me. I never even heard footsteps behind me, but when I got home, I still locked myself in right away and closed all of my blinds. I remember thinking, it saw me. And then, why does it feel like an it and not a person? This was about 5 days ago, and I still feel horrible. I keep trying to rationalize it because, honestly, it was just some woman acting strange. But for some reason, I can't shake it. I feel jumpy all the time. I find myself looking for this woman constantly, and once in a while I see someone just standing there, very still, facing away from me. I get this uncomfortable feeling like they're watching me, even though I can't see their face. I don't want to leave my house. What do I do?
He's my everything. I give him everything he needs, even before he knows he needs it. I cook for him, I keep the house tidy. When he comes home from work, I'm always there, greeting him with a warm meal and a bright smile. Everything within the home is my domain. In here, I can do anything I want. Go on the internet, watch TV, listen to the radio, anything. That's why not being allowed outside doesn't bother me so much. Besides, it's not like I want to leave. I know other people wouldn't understand our relationship. And nothing on earth could make me leave him. Sometimes he's upset when he comes home. Those times he raises his hand and slaps the smile off my face. Other times he'll sit at the kitchen table, drinking and getting madder and madder. He'll yell at me and start throwing punches, saying it's my fault that he is the way he is and that I've done this to myself. Then he'll grab me by my manacled wrists, drag me over to the basement door, and throw me in. I'll hear the lock slide into place just before his footsteps thud on the wooden floor. But I love him unconditionally, and he always apologizes and lets me out. I forgive him, no questions asked. Everyone has their issues, right? We can get through it. Sometimes he gets lost, though. I pick up on the signs so easily. He'll stay out late and come home smelling like Italian food and a perfume I've never worn. And when that happens, I can't help but break down. I scream and cry, wailing that he has me and doesn't need anyone else. Why can't he stay here with me? What can those other girls give him that I can't? At least these lapses in judgment never last long. He always comes back, and I welcome him with open arms. But lately it's been more frequent. I notice him staring off into space over dinner. He's always distracted, and sometimes he looks at me with open revulsion. And I've been smelling perfume again, too. But it's always the same perfume. He's never lingered this long over any of those other girls. What makes her so special? What makes her better than me? This morning, he sat me down on the couch. He told me he's bringing her home this evening, and my job is to make them a nice dinner and stay out of sight. He said that if everything went well, she'd get to meet me. He said he thought she would make a good addition to our family. I tried to tell him no, that I'd never cook for some garden variety tart, but he just scowled viciously at me, snarled that I'm not the boss of him, and left. I knew I'd make him angry, and I hate making him angry. So when he opened the basement door several hours later, I just obediently ascended the stairs and sulked all the way to the kitchen. I set about preparing a salad and a pasta dish for them to enjoy. I took great care setting the table, wanting to make everything perfect for him in spite of my stabbing jealousy. He watched me closely as I put the food down, making sure I didn't do anything to mess up his date. But he didn't pay as much attention to me when I put a little something extra in her wine. I waited in the kitchen unseen as the doorbell rang. I heard a soft, feminine voice, quickly joined by his stressed, nervous laughter. As they chatted and giggled their way through dinner, evidently having a lovely time, I stayed perfectly still in the kitchen so she wouldn't hear the rattling of the chains around my hands and feet. I waited until I heard her start to choke and her breathing grow heavier. Then I stepped out of the kitchen and watched her writhing on the floor. Just as I suspected, she was younger and prettier than I am. Eventually, she turned her baffled eyes on me. She died with a look of horror on her face. Oh, he was mad at me. He hit me harder than he ever had before. He shouted that he just wanted to have a normal life. He didn't understand why I had to ruin everything, and he wouldn't listen when I told him I just did it for us. He yanked me over to the basement and threw me in so violently that I fell down the stairs and twisted my ankle. I sat down there, tears streaming down my face. Finally, I started to call to him. It took hours, but eventually I heard the locks and saw the door open, and the light from the living room surrounded him in a warm glow. I smiled and held out my bruised arms. He was sobbing as he descended the stairs, and fell into my embrace. He clung desperately to my shirt while I murmured soothingly to him. The love that rushed over me was just the same as when I'd first met him so many years before. when the doctor handed him to me and said, "Congratulations, it's a boy." Oh. Through the month of October, my local amusement park has a huge event called Fright Night. The park is doused in decorations and lights of orange and green, purple and red. Actors dressed like zombies, killer clowns, and possessed kids wander around and scare patrons as they pass. It's a tradition for a group of friends and me to go and enjoy the haunted houses. This year, my friend sent me a link from the park's website with a special announcement. Anyone going to Fright Night could win a free season pass for next year if they took a picture of 30 actors in the park, not counting those in the haunted house. Now recently, the prices for tickets have spiked to the extreme price of $50 a pop, and tossing that on top of the expensive amusement park food and a quarter of my paycheck, poof, gone baby, gone. Since I've put myself on a budget so I can move out of my parents' house and get a place of my own before I turn 25, I'm 23 right now, I've pretty much cut having fun out of my life if it goes above 20. In other words, I accept your challenge, greedy amusement park. We went one rainy Saturday night, and I let my friends know about the offer. In the beginning, it was as easy as pie, as the tunnel which leads to the park has almost a dozen actors creeping in the thick artificial fog. 11 pictures so far, only 19 to go. Unfortunately, the further into the park we went, the fewer actors there were scattered throughout. After the first 2 haunted houses, only 5 more photos were added to the collection. I wasn't too worried, since I still had a few hours to find 14 actors. I got a bit more successful in the next 2 hours, but I got a lot of repeat pictures and some offended normals who I might have thought were zombies just because of a deep limb or strikingly pale skin. I apologized and kept it moving. A little more than an hour left, and I had 26 photos. My friends aimed for another haunted house with a long, curving line that had to be at least a 20-minute wait. I told them I'd skip this one and use the time to hunt down the last few actors. That way, the rest of the night, I could just relax. I wandered around the foggy park, looking in every corner and really eyeing some of the hooded figures who walked by. I had walked into the side of the park where a haunted attraction was closed due to the rain and traffic was minimal. The noise of the park, playful music, and laughing groups of people echoed down the dimly lit path. I wasn't really paying attention, doubtful any actors were there looking for people to spook, when I heard a rustling sound. There was a closed-off children's coaster where a tiny train would go in circles. Tall straws of hay blocked it off, but you could still see between some gaps, and I peeked through to see a dark figure crouched on the ground. Honestly, at the time, I thought it was an actor taking a break. For a second, I wasn't going to take a photo since it might have been intrusive, but I was so close to 30, and if I gave up, I would have completely wasted this night and money for nothing. I angled my phone until there weren't any strands of hay in the way of the camera and tapped the button. It flashed twice, but it was too fast to get a look at the figure. Whoever it was, though, jerked at the flash, jumped up and charged the wall of hay like a linebacker. I dashed down the wet pathway as the sound of heavy, stomping feet chased me. I nearly crashed into a group of friends as I entered the busy part of the park, and I looked behind me to just see a group of friends roaming around. My phone buzzed, with a message from my friends saying that they were at the potato patch waiting for me. I took one more look around me and went to meet up with my friends. Wimp! My buddy Franco laughed when I told him the story, and I forced a laugh back. Yeah, I guess he got me. I mumbled and shoved a cheese-smothered fry into my mouth. They continued to fling insults at me when my eyes wandered to a closed gift shop across from our table. Under the shadow to the side of the shop, a figure stood facing us. I felt as if their gaze was targeting me. I wanted to point it out, but I knew my friends would just bag on me again, so I tried not to notice as I continued to eat. By the time we finished and headed to the last attraction, they were still standing there, completely still, like a mannequin. The last haunted house was called the Maze of Shadows. I remember the year before would get pitch black to the point where it was hard to even see. We huddled together as we entered the thick fog of the maze. Random doors and sliding windows in the walls would slam open with actors screeching and lurching like they were about to attack. Of course, they weren't allowed to touch anybody. We walked on wet soil, taking turn after turn as the light waned slowly away until we entered the deep darkness. I was holding on to the shoulder of my friend in front of me, but they started to walk faster and faster and they just slipped from my grip. "Brian, slow down," I said with my hand stretched out in front of me. I bumped into the walls like a bowling ball on the bumpers. Suddenly, the person from behind me grabbed onto my hoodie and I jumped. "Whoa, excuse me, no touchy please," I joked. They ignored me and an arm wrapped around my waist, their hand groping around. My face turned red and my lungs grew tight. "Hey, get off me, man, get off!" With flailing arms and balled fists, I charged forward. I think I landed a hit right on their nose, or at least something that felt like it, and their arm retreated. I kept swinging my fist until I pushed through a heavy curtain where my friends were waiting. "Seriously?" Brian laughed. "Have you always been this much of a baby?" Everyone laughed until I told them someone was groping me, which made them freeze. Weirdly, though, no one came out behind us. After waiting for 5 minutes wanting to confront the person, we finally walked to the entrance to see that they had placed a sign reading, "Closed." We must have been the last group to go in. "I wonder if it was an actor?" Franco guessed. I got queasy thinking about the figure I saw. Should we report it? I mean, that's assault and against the rules," Brian said. "Whatever, let's just go. I still need 3 more pictures and it's free rides all next summer," I said with forced enthusiasm. I started walking to the entrance, forcing the cold feeling on my back away. Luckily, I got 5 more photos as we exited the park. Maybe there'd be a bonus gift if you got more than 30. Brian dropped me off at home and I flopped onto my bed, pulling my phone out of my pocket to open Instagram where I had to post the photos with a special hashtag. As I tapped the photos, I noticed one I didn't recognize. And then I thought, I never looked at the picture of that figure behind the hay wall. I went to my photos to get a better look at the enlarged image. The figure was slim and wore a hooded black trench coat with white high-top sneakers and dark blue jeans. They were facing away from the camera, but hovered over something that still burned into my mind a week later. The body of a young girl laid on the wet ground. Part of her pale face was held between the figure's fingers like a piece of tissue as they cut it off with a knife. Half of her blood-covered skull was exposed, along with her huge eye with a green iris that I could still see in my mind staring directly at me. I deleted the photo. I wish I hadn't, so I could show the police what I saw, because since that fright night, my dog barks at my bedroom window as if there's something or someone there trying to get in. Don't read this. It's so rude of you to read something clearly meant for someone else. I can't imagine ever being that inconsiderate. You should just close this now before someone finds out you've done it. Jeez, I put this up for one person, even addressed to them, and here you come sticking your nose in. Good. They should be gone now. And if you're still here, I need you to pay close attention to what I have to say. I don't actually care who you are. This isn't really meant for just one person. It's meant for anyone who has noticed recently that people around them suddenly seem much nicer, much more polite. You know, that landlord that's always been sort of a douche, but
Now they're suddenly reasonable and calm? Or your boss, who abruptly understands what mental health days are, even though just a few weeks ago they barely understood you were legally allowed sick days. It's always people you knew. Almost always people who had power over others in some way, and always people who were general douchebags. They don't have to have done something really evil or awful. In fact, I've noticed most of the time they were irritating jerks at worst. I first encountered them about a year ago. I lived in an overpriced, overhyped apartment complex in an upper-class part of town. It was a really nice apartment, despite how much it was too expensive and too jumped up. And I loved it there. Except my apartment landlord. She was a neurotic, controlling mess. Nothing was ever a small problem. Everything was a huge deal. Everything a stressful ordeal. And when I was finally ready to move out into my first real house, oh boy, was that the end of the world. Every way she could make the move a huge pain for me, she found. It was clear she didn't want to lose a good tenant in my money, and I mean, fine, okay, fair enough. But really, lady, there's better ways to go about it. You really don't need to know all the details of the legal bullcrap she put me through. Just that one day, near the end of it, she abruptly knocked on my door. "Hey, Marley," she said. This wasn't really unusual. Like I said, she was neurotic. It wasn't, unusual for her to flip through moods like most people flip through a book. She could go from sweet to friendly to screaming in less than 2 full hours. "Can we talk?" Talk. I rolled my eyes to myself, but forced a polite smile. "Sure, of course. Come on in. Because that's what you do, right?" She gave me another creepily empty smile and let herself in, closing my door behind her. "Thank you," she said. And okay, that was a little weird. Yeah, okay. No worries. I smiled. "Have a seat. Can I get you a drink?" I kid you not, her smile spread. Like, it grew. But it still didn't touch her eyes. I felt uneasy now, like something wasn't quite right here. Nervous, unsure, but I mean, I've always been a little socially awkward, so I just chalked it up to that. "No, thank you," she replied, folding her legs neatly, her hands in her lap. "Marley, dear, we've had so many disagreements lately, so much unpleasantness. I really feel like I need to apologize to you. My behavior's been simply unacceptable." I blinked, sitting down hard in the chair across from her. Okay, this was weird. This took weird and blew past it at the speed of a racer, leaving it in the dust. No, it's fine. I haven't exactly been on my best behavior either, I replied. I mean, maybe it was strange, but she was turning over a new leaf. Well, who am I to try and stop her, you know? Even if she was Stepford about it, niceness was probably strange to her. Or maybe she was on meds. Finally. "I'm glad you can see that." She beamed at me, like her entire face lit up, like I just offered her $1,000. "I think it's time we patch things up between us, clear the air. I just hate that we've been so rude to each other." She smiled again, extending a hand. "Can we start over?" Now, if I'd taken it, if I'd touched her, I'm pretty sure I'd have been dead then and there. I don't know what made me think twice. Something in her eyes, something in her face. I pulled my hand back. Something changed in her eyes. They went cold and blank. For a minute, she looked like a machine, calculating and considering. "It's very rude not to shake someone's hand when they offer," she said, and her voice was sharp and clipped. "You should shake my hand." I swallowed, trying to think of any excuse. "I've been sick lately."
shake my hand. I stepped back, feeling abruptly threatened, a cold feeling crawling up my spine and through the pit of my stomach. I stepped back again, and this time I cracked into the end table behind me. It happened so fast I thought I was imagining it. She jerked her head around to see what had made the noise, and her pupils turned to cat-like slits for a moment. I bolted. I shoved past her, out of my own house, down my front steps, doing the first thing I could think to do, screaming fire. Okay, I didn't literally scream fire, but I did scream rape. Yeah, I feel like crap about it still to this day, but I knew I would get attention, get people to notice something was really wrong. I could see doors opening and people sticking their heads out, but it took 4 doors before someone moved to do anything about it. A big man ran out and grabbed me by the shoulders. Hey, easy, who's after you? Maggie? Call the cops, he barked over his shoulder. I was crying. I didn't know when I'd started, but I could just feel the tears rolling down my cheeks. I wasn't even really sure why. Nothing had actually happened. It had just been weird and off, and now I was suddenly realizing how much trouble I might actually be in. I'd created what people probably thought was a false emergency. Weren't there laws about screaming fire when there was no actual emergency? Was I gonna go to jail? I was seeing things. I didn't sleep well last night. Maybe I just imagined it. Oh, shoot. I'm going to jail. I forced myself to take a deep breath to try and calm down as the man sat me down on a chair on his front porch. Someone, Maggie, I imagine, came out, phone in hand. Hey, sugar, the lady wants to talk to you. The lady? The receiver lady? She wants to know if you can talk to her. I said yes. Of course I said yes. We often inherently trust people in authority. Yell all you want about how you don't like cops, whatever, but I promise you, when an emergency arises, you'll be looking to them for help more often than not. Or at least I do. So I took the phone, sniffling, fully prepared to be told I was wasting 911's time and the authorities' time and possibly told to see someone for my clear mental condition. What happened in actuality was way worse. That wasn't very polite of you, was it? Cooed the voice over the phone after I took the receiver and said a shaky hello. Bolting out of the house like that, you shouldn't be rude. I stared in horror at the cell phone, feeling my breath seize in my chest and my stomach roll. No way! I had to be having some kind of episode, fit. I had to be. What do you mean? She attacked me. She just wanted to talk. The woman was clearly frowning deeply. That was very rude. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be the one to chastise you, but I just can't not say. Kid, you okay? It was the man, the one who'd grabbed me. You're hyperventilating. I wasn't okay. None of this was okay. Something was so wrong. I wound up hanging up on the lady and stammering out some kind of excuse or reason to leave. I remember saying something about wanting to go get my dad, how he'd want me to call him, how he lived nearby. That was a lie. I remember the police officer pulling up just as I bolted, and I remember hearing people yell in surprise. Since then, I've seen 3 or 4 more of them. They hate to be rude. And I'm almost positive that if you're too rude, you can kill them, or at least chase them off. I'll tell you why I think that later. Right now, I'm in the library on their computer, and there's this librarian who keeps trying to pretend she's not staring at me. I think she's one of them, because every time I look up, she scuttles off, bright red, and hides. I wish I could say I think she just has a crush. Be careful out there. So every week, we put an ad in the paper. We're looking for a specific kind of person, the same kind the Statue of Liberty wants. The tired, the poor, those who've given up. Really, we just want someone who won't be missed. It's an ad for an acting job, but usually the people who get the part couldn't act their way out of a parking ticket. For these guys, we're their first big break. Finally, their talent's being recognized, and they've scored a part in an acclaimed off-Broadway show. Of course, they think it'll be the stepping stone to bigger and better things. And of course, it won't. We call the people in this role burners. You could say our whole production revolves around them. It takes a well-oiled machine to replace actors quick enough that they can learn their part. It's a small part, sure, but it's still not easy to pick up and train new actors that quickly. And our legal department must be wizards, making so many deaths untraceable. Of course, it helps that the witnesses are either in on it or don't believe it. It's nothing short of Herculean, but it's worth it. I guess you could say they're our gimmick. The burners don't know, if I haven't made that clear. They don't know that they're going to be shot on stage until they are, and usually even a little after that. In all the rehearsals, we use a fake gun. And when they've got lines to remember and performance anxiety and plenty of lights in their face, who's gonna notice that this time my revolver's actually real, I fire, the burner screams and collapses in what I'm sure much of the audience thinks is the only good acting he's done all night. And the curtain's down for intermission. It all happens fast enough that no one asks questions, but slow enough that they can definitely enjoy the show. Mostly, they're blissfully oblivious, but that's not to say none of the audience knows what's going on. A lot of them leave during intermission having seen what they came for. There are circles, naturally, where the people know and love what we do. And we know how to market just right to those people. And it lets our tickets go for the same price as tickets to Hamilton. But anyway, this is about me, about my experience. The central motif of our play involves the heart, which demands that I shoot the burners in the chest. Consequently, they're not always out like a light. We can't have a similar problem with bashing their heads with the butt of my gun. And when I tried that with the sledgehammer, we didn't get the floor fixed in time for the next performance. So last night, as a solution to this problem, as well as for my own amusement, I tried to reason with the man dying at my feet. Shh. I bent down slowly over him. He started to yell, so I put my hand on his throat, driving it down until I choked out that sound. I said quiet. I was starting to realize the flaw in this plan. He looked up at me, and his pain and shock were clear. His eyes drifted, but the terror in them was unmistakable. It's a bit scary, but I'd be lying if I said this wasn't my favorite part. Why? He choked out. I don't understand why dying people always demand to know why. Is he asking me? Or the universe? Maybe, facing morality, he's asking if God is truly up there, and if he is, why he was so cruel as to let me shoot the dude in the chest with what he'd assumed was a prop. I couldn't answer the existential, so I told him my reasoning. For the show, I smiled. The dramatic betrayal lands so much better if it's real, we personally think. Working on 2 levels, I guess. Admittedly, I got carried away. I wasn't sure if I was talking to him as much as myself when I continued. I've always thought that the audience could tell a little what's happening. On some level, they know they're watching you be killed, and it thrills them. The intrigue of a murder right in front of them, but without any consequences, because of their plausible deniability. His eyes went blank, and the man I was ranting to now was clearly dead. I didn't stop. They don't want to know, don't want to get their hands dirty, most of them, but I think they all love to see it. This is why they love the show. Even those who don't know it's real. They think they can sense it, think it might be. And they love it. Absolutely love to see what they think they see. I dragged the body off the stage, and the crew rushed in to quickly sop up any blood he'd left. My heart was beating fast. It had been
exhilarating talking to my victim. Maybe I'll do it next time. Maybe it's more risky, but like that half-clued in audience, I can't resist. I love to see a man dying while he's monologued at, like I'm watching the transition between earth and void. Like I'm dancing the dance with death myself. I gave him to our disposal crew. Our recruiters will call another hopeful young soul tomorrow morning. The show must go on.
Hello. With the surge of popularity and stories about rules, I came to realize that there's one from my own life that I feel ready to share. To give you an idea of who I am and why I do what I do for seemingly no gain, I'll provide you with some background. I'm a very lonely person that borders on being a hermit. I live on my own with no neighbors to speak of, no family, and no friends. With the advent of self-service machines in supermarkets and online agencies, I've lost the last source of human interaction. I'm fine with that. I am, however, superstitious, or even religious, you could say. I believe and know, as you'll soon understand, that there's more to the world than meets the eye. I know that there's some kind of afterlife and that there's something inside each and every one of us that's beyond biology. I like my solitary lifestyle, but I don't like the fact that I'm leaving nothing behind. I think it's intrinsic to every human being to want to leave behind a legacy, and that it's not as simple as the drive to reproduce and have children. It's spiritual. It comes from somewhere else. Every year, people travel en masse to graveyards to light candles in remembrance for their late loved ones, but by the end of the night, so many graves remain unlit and forgotten. I know that is my fate, and so I shouldered the mantle of the Good Samaritan of All Saints' Day. It will be my legacy, not to the people I leave behind, but to the forsaken that came before me. So why am I about to share these rules with you all after having kept it to myself for the entirety of my adult life? Well, my liver's in sharp decline, and I don't know how much longer I can carry on. It'd warm my heart knowing that when I'm finally forced to throw in the towel, someone else out there is ready to become the Good Samaritan in my stead. I'd feel good knowing that someone, someday, might tend to my unlit grave on All Saints' Day. It's a simple task that doesn't take much time nor money if you're on a budget. You only have to do it one night every year. And it doesn't matter who you are. Almost any healthy person can do it. If you follow these rules that I've worked out through many years of trial and error, you'll minimize the risks involved. First of all, go to any store that sells grave candles and a lighter if you don't have one. I usually go with an 8-pack, but there's no rule on how many graves you have to light. If you're feeling uncomfortable the first time, it might be better to start with less because you won't have a lot of time once you're inside the graveyard. You'll also need a knife that's at least moderately sharp, and a digital watch can be good but isn't mandatory. Also, make sure to be wearing shoes you're comfortable running in. No heels, please. On the night of All Saints' Day, make sure to be at the graveyard by 11:30 p.m. with all of your items. It will always be clear of all other visitors by this hour. That is unfortunately something I cannot explain, but it always is. If you arrive just a minute earlier, you might still see someone inside, but when it shifts over, they'll be gone. Do not enter before 11:30. Once you're in, you have 30 minutes to find the unlit graves and light your candles. If you've decided to bring 4, a good idea is to imagine the graveyard as 4 squares and place one in each so that everyone has a chance. If you cheapen out by lighting them to the 4 closest graves by the entrance, it defeats the entire point and proves you care more about yourself than the forgotten, in which case you don't deserve to be the Good Samaritan. Rule number 1. Don't bring cell phones or bikes into the graveyard. This is a common courtesy, no matter the day or your purpose. Leave them at home, or park the bike outside. Rule number 2. Don't bring a torch to light your way. You'll have to navigate and piece together the path by looking at the lit graves. If the graveyard has lampposts, never walk directly in the light. Some encounters are less likely to happen if you stay in the dark. Rule number 3. If you hear the approaching sound of a ringing handbell and footsteps, immediately trace where the sound's coming from and lower your head into a bow in that direction while standing still. A hunched, vaguely human-shaped figure carrying aforementioned bell will walk past you, politely bow its own head in return, and be on its way. This is by far one of the easiest encounters, since it always announces itself clearly and you'll know where it's coming from. The downside is that it wastes a lot of time with how slowly it walks. It's rare for the entity to show itself in well-lit conditions, but once I could make out something akin to a goat's skull where its head should be, it's okay to look as long as your own head remains down. Rule number 4. This one is my favorite encounter that I actually miss every year it's not around. If you see a shapely female silhouette making its way towards you, quickly use the knife I told you to bring and slice a cut in your palm. Splash some blood on the ground and step back at least a couple of meters. You can walk away immediately and choose a different path after this, or just stand and watch. I like to spare a few seconds and do the latter. If the area is well lit enough to see her, you'll notice just how enchantingly beautiful she is. She'll stop by the tribute of blood, lap it up from the ground, and then turn and leave, paying you no heed. Make sure that you don't look at her when she leaves, because there's nothing there but a gnarled hole like a rotten, hollowed-out tree trunk. She won't react to you seeing it, but you'll be left feeling disorientation with a piercing headache, which is something you absolutely don't need right now. Rule number 5. Here comes the worst and most uncomfortable rule. If you hear the sound of crying children all around you, look all around until you spot movement in the shadows, and then run in the opposite direction as fast as humanly possible. You're safe once you can't hear their cries anymore. It will sound as if the whines come from every direction, so you have to rely on your eyesight to spot them before they reach you. If they do reach you, they'll try to climb on top of your back, and I don't know what happens if they make it that far, nor do I want to find out. Don't return to that part of the graveyard that year. Rule number 6. Moving, floating orbs of light are not normal. Think of them as anglerfish and stay away. Rule number 7. If you see groups of what appears to be people congregating underneath the light of a lamppost, choose a different path. I've never gotten close enough to get a good idea of what happens if you do, but remember that you're there on a mission and you want to avoid any and all obstacles that waste your time or worse. Nothing human except you stays at the graveyard past 11:30 p.m. on All Saints' Day. Rule number 8. Sometimes small creatures will run in front of your feet. They're harmless, and I thought they were rats until the night I accidentally stepped on one. It emitted a horrible, piercing shriek that attracted just about every entity in my direction. Don't repeat the same mistake, please. Rule number 9. Be out by 12. This is why it's good to bring a digital watch so you can keep track of time. You know All Saints' Day is over when you hear the sound of violins and laughter erupt all over the graveyard. This is the first rule I learned. When I was a kid, my grandmother told me that's when the hidden folks come out to feast on all the new corpses of people who have died. I always wondered what would happen if a year passed without any new corpses. Well, once you've fulfilled your duty and lit all your candles, just leave the graveyard as you normally would. Nothing follows you out, and you'll have an entire year's worth of rest before it's time to be a good Samaritan again. These 9 rules should help you out a fair bit on the way, but I'm sad to say that my memory isn't what it used to be, and I'm almost certain I've forgotten some. All precautions are so firmly ingrained into my mind that I carry them out by heart, but when pushed to write them down on a concise list, it becomes more difficult. No matter. If I was able to figure out all of this on my own, so should you. I'm waiting out the last few hours before I go out for this year's All Saints' Day myself. I hope I've inspired some of you to pick up the torch and carry it on for me. With how things have been going, this year may very well be my last act as the Good Samaritan of All Saints' Day. Good luck.
I can't really remember well how I came to assume the role that I had, the role that is now taken away from me, as my memory really isn't the best. But here is my story, the story of this lonely creature of the night. For as long as my memory would let me remember, I've been roaming around on my own in the dead of the night, just pointlessly moving from shadow to shadow, avoiding loud noises and humans. I avoid loud noises because I hate them, and I avoid humans because they hate me. How do I know that when I've never interacted with one? I don't know. Perhaps a long, long time ago, in a different time and form, I had. But that is not something that I'm able to recall anymore. For the longest time, my existence seemed to be void of meaning, always alone and scared, living without any purpose in my reality. Until I met these children, you humans call them. Such precious and pure little creatures, and so soft, too. One day, late at night, I saw these little humans, two to be more precise, wandering around the park all alone. I never found out what they were doing, and I can't seem to remember the emotions they had on their faces while walking hand in hand in their lonesome, under the dim, quivering lampposts of the park. But I just remember feeling this sense of, what do you humans call it? Protectiveness? That night, at that moment, and at that place, I was the only one present. I knew I couldn't just let them go off on their own. I was the only one who could watch over those weak little humans. And so I did. All the way to their home, all the way to the warm, tight embrace of their parents, and all the way to their cozy beds. I made sure not to get myself seen. All this time, wandering the streets, avoiding all human sight, has taught me how to be patient and how to find the right timing. From their window to their closet, I moved swiftly and silently. Later into the night, when they were sound asleep, I would move from their closet to beneath their bed, and I'd listen to their breathing while feeling their little heartbeats traveling through the bed frame. It made me feel this foreign but somehow nostalgic sense of relief, knowing that these children were safe. It made me feel as though they were sharing their heat with me. After that first night, I had found my purpose. Every night, I would slip into their room right before they went to bed. Then I would watch them through a crack in their closet till the covers rose up and down in a steady rhythm to get under their bed. It was pleasant. Every night went by peacefully, for the most part. One night, some men dressed in night colors came into the house uninvited. At first, I almost believed they might have been similar creatures to me, but I was wrong. The parents weren't home. The children were sound asleep. I heard the unfamiliar sound of rummaging downstairs. I nervously listened inside the closet. Sure enough, the two children got woken up. The taller one shushed and held the smaller one in their bed. They were afraid. Something swelled up inside me. Footsteps traveling up the stairs could be heard. The children were shaking. I didn't know what to do. The door swung open. Two men with dark clothes stormed inside. They saw the children defenselessly sitting up in their bed. I rushed out of the closet, startling the children and the men. They all looked at me with fear in their eyes. I stood, putting myself between the men and the children. The men stared at me blankly for a second while I waited for their move, as I really didn't know what to do. To my relief, they immediately turned around to run away while signaling the others to leave. For once, I was glad that I was so hated by humans. I stayed still, waiting for all possible signs of those men still being inside the house to disappear. I figured I couldn't be with the children anymore. They were so afraid of me. And they probably hated me just as much as those larger humans did. I turned back to look at them for what I thought was the last time, and forced out with a voice that I no longer recognized. Good night. But right before I left, the smaller one grabbed my skin in the back and asked for my name. Surprised, I carefully turned around and shook my head. A name. I don't think I've ever had one prior, and even if I did, there was no use for it anymore. The smaller one loosened its grip, and I took the opportunity to get away. I couldn't recall the last time I had this much interaction with any human. After the incident, I stopped visiting the children for a while. During those times, I felt hollow, like I had lost something that was important. A feeling that I had almost forgotten. I missed their endless babbling on all those nights foreign to me. I missed their breathing that slowed down to a soothing cadence, and the warmth that I felt when I laid close to them. And I kept thinking about, what if more unknown humans were to get those children during the night? What if I was not there that night and the children would have gotten hurt? I was the one that saved them. I can't leave them. When I went back, the children found me inside their closet. The smaller one pulled me out with a force I didn't expect something of its size would have, and looked at me with big eyes and an open mouth, while the taller one just watched. They talked and talked. The smaller one in particular asked me all kinds of questions I couldn't answer. I don't know what was happening to me. Something about those children made me feel things I didn't know how to describe. They calmed down with the questions and, seeing as I didn't talk, settled down. The smaller one told me that it was okay and that I didn't have to be so scared. I wasn't scared, on the contrary. I was feeling something else. I slowly reached out to stroke the younger one's cheek. The younger one just smiled and didn't move away. It was unbelievably soft, and it was warm in a way that only existed with the children. Something stirred inside me. The older one abruptly pulled the younger one away. I was surprised. I wanted to feel their flesh some more. I looked at the older one. It pulled them to their bed and said that the parents would be home soon, and told me to hide in the closet again. For the next few nights, the children would bring me out of the closet. They would talk to me, show me things I didn't know, and play with me. They tried to make me talk, but I could rarely ever manage to find the right words to say. Their parents always came home late, so that gave me more time to spend with the children. Even the taller ones seemed to have become more comfortable around me, talked to me more, and even let the smaller one climb on me while we were playing. Then, when bedtime came, I would go back to watching over them under the shadows cast by the moon. For those nights, I can truthfully say that I was happy. I was so filled with all these vaguely familiar, forgotten feelings that I got careless. I no longer felt the need to constantly stay hidden anymore. For the first time in what seemed like forever, I wasn't alone, and I wasn't feared nor hated. But I wasn't ready for what came of me. When the parents walked into the room and saw me at the foot of their children's bed, as I was naively waiting for the children to come. The one with longer hair and nails screamed and screeched at me. The stronger, heavier one stormed into the room. He hit and grabbed me with so much strength. He almost tore my skin off, if not for the children storming in and begging their father to stop. The mother wrapped my little humans in a warm, tight embrace, shushed and squeezed them while they tried to explain. Over their mother's shoulders, red and blue lights flashed on the children's faces while they looked at me with confusion and sadness in their eyes. Even with my bad memory, those eyes are something I can't seem to forget. They have caught me and thrown me in a small room. They've torn off my skin and hidden it away. Even the string I had tied around my neck to keep my skin from moving was taken from me. They give me food that I can't stomach and try to drown me every so often. Here I am, trapped and unable to leave, unable to watch over my little humans. I don't know where I am. I don't know where they are. All I know is that I miss them. I miss having a purpose. I miss the warmth. I miss children. There are other creatures trapped here. Some are similar to me. Some are different. Some are nice and some are evil. One was very nice to me. It was the only one that talked to me in a way similar to the children. Though it couldn't take away this cold emptiness inside me the same way they did, it gave me some kind of comfort, as well as this number, 819. This magical number on this tiny piece of paper that is my only hope left in here. I really hope they'll let me keep it, as I can no longer count on my memory. Will you help me? Will you please help me? From time to time, they bring me to this autumn-colored room with a human that tries to make me talk, but different from the children. Though their voice was soft, they were void of any warmth, and the other humans just look at us with blatant disdain in their eyes. I don't think I've ever been this afraid of humans before. I am starting to question if some of them are just like us. Perhaps some are just better at disguises than others. My thoughts keep going back to the warmth and the intoxicating happiness in the nights I spent with the children. They've tried to put new skin on me, but they stunk of harsh chemicals and suffocate me. Without my own skin, I am weak, cold, and afraid. I can feel myself slowly withering. I've been hurting, and my memory has been acting up. Please tell those humans I mean no harm. I know they hate me, but I know they don't hate you. Please help me out of here. I promise I'll be good. I promise I won't let myself be seen. I promise I'll only stay in the closet. So please, help me get out of this place. And I'll watch over your children at night.